to welcome everyone to this meeting tonight of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the committee members, other councillors who are attending, officers, and also I know we have several members of the public here tonight. My name is Marie-Therese Rossi. I am the chair. Sorry, I'm just putting on my camera. I'm the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I have to say that this meeting is being held in guidance with government guidelines now that we are not all allowed to meet together and we have to meet virtually. So please bear with me if anything technical goes wrong in the meeting, and if my connection goes down, then my vice chairman, Adrian Barrell-Cox, will take over. This event is also being streamed live so that members of the public can follow the meeting. And I would like again to welcome anyone who is new to Scrutiny and thank them for coming along tonight. So I think it would be appropriate if we started the meeting with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell Tower fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've now unmuted myself. So at the outset, I would like to ask members of the committee to only switch their microphones and cameras on when they are speaking. That helps us to save bandwidth. And also to say that if a councillor would like to speak on any item and haven't been called, if they could write a Q in the chat column, that would be helpful. And also to remind everyone only to use that for chat, because yes, only to use it to put down a Q, because otherwise it does get distracting and I can't see who really wants to speak. So also, so that everyone knows who is speaking, could you please announce your name before you speak so everyone knows who it is? Otherwise it could be a bit confusing. And I've said already that if my connection drops, that my vice chair, Councillor Adrian Barrell-Cox, will take over. Now I'm going to call on each member of the committee individually to see that they are here, and also at the same time to ask them whether they have any declaration of interest to make before the meeting starts. So firstly, Adrian Barrell-Cox.
Present and no declarations of interest, thank you.
Max Chowan.
Present and no declaration of interest either.
Marwal Enagi.
Present, Chair, and no declaration of interest. Thank you.
Janet Evans.
Present, Chair, and no declarations of interest. Thank you.
Gregory Hammond.
Here, ma'am, and nothing to declare.
David Lindsay. Councillor David Lindsay.
He appears to be logged on, Chair.
Okay, maybe his connection's gone wrong. Councillor Pat Mason.
Present and no declaration of interest, Chair.
Councillor Will Pascal.
Present, Chair, and no declaration of interest. Thank you.
Could someone check on Councillor Lindsay's connection to see?
I am here. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. So,
okay.
Chairman, I am present and I have no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Good to see you, David.
Thank you.
So, apologies for absence is Councillor Kazim Ali, who has been suffering from COVID, but tells me that he and his family are now getting better. So that's good to hear. So I'll go to item A3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of November. Does anyone have any comments to make on that, or can I take them as accurate and sign them virtually?
Agree.
Councillor Pascal?
Unmute myself. I assume that the minuted item under A8, forward plan and key decision tracker, anything arising from that will come up under our item A9 this time.
I believe so, yes. I mean,
Okay.
that's still a matter in progress. So, yeah, we'll discuss that later on.
Thank you. Otherwise, I'm fine with the minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so I can take those as accurate, and we'll move on to the main part of the meeting. So,
Yes.
Item A4, we have the petition to stop the felling of trees on the Warnington Green estate. This petition was taken to full council by Councillor Mason, and we have agreed to include it in the agenda tonight, because I think it's important that the residents are able to come forward and have their say, and to meet with Catalyst and also the lead member. So we have Catalyst Housing here, and I think 3 members from Catalyst Housing. So firstly, I know there are more residents in the meeting than this, but in the first instance, I'm going to ask Constantine Grass and Keith Sterling to speak about the matter for 10 minutes to speak about the petition. Then I'm going to ask Catalyst to respond. Then I'm going to ask the lead member, Johnny Felicitas, to respond. And then we will start to take questions from the committee and the floor. Okay, so Mr. Grass, if you would like to start. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, my name is Constantine Grash. Thank you for receiving this petition to stop 42 trees being felled on Warnington Green Estate. And we're also calling on Catalyst Housing to consult more meaningfully with residents of the estate and the wider North Kensington community. This petition was signed by over 1,000 people, and we collected 160 signatures from the estate itself. Let me introduce Keith Sterling, lifelong resident of Warnington Green Estate. He will speak for the next few minutes, and then I'll come in after him. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to bring up the subject of Warnington Green and the Goulburn area in general, as it is well documented that the health of the people who actually live in this part of the borough is not in a great shape, due to the fact to the south of us we have Westway, to the west of us we have Ladbroke Grove, and behind us we have the British Rail stations and all that sort of thing, trains going past. So people in the area, health is not too good. It's 10 years since the first planning application for this went in. And in those 10 years, a lot has happened. regarding the environment. And it has come to the notice of the world, in fact, that we are in a very, very precarious position regarding the felling of trees, our oxygen and the ozone layer. Chopping down trees doesn't help. The people of Warrington Green and the wider area need their trees. I don't see any reason why the trees that are already on Warrington Green can't be transplanted instead of being chopped down. There is plenty of scope to do this as we have affluent gardens on site. We are also thinking about putting smaller trees around the area, but London plane trees are the ones that supply us with the most benefit. They not only clean the air, they supply us with oxygen, and we need that in this area more than anything else. We are suffering from deprivation of trees in this area where the rest of the borough is really healthy in London plane trees, and we need to retain the trees that we have and not chop them down. Affluent Gardens is at the moment being regenerated as well, and it's a perfect place to put the trees that we have, and they can be transplanted because I've looked into this, and there is no reason why they can't be put there for the benefit of everybody in the area, not only those on Warrington Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Actually, just by way of introduction, I've just heard that Catalyst have been listening to residents and have just posted the newsletter to us, I think, and they've revised their plans to fell 42 trees down to 37 trees. The Royal Borough loves its trees, from posh squares to our green housing estates. We all love to look at trees and listen to the bird song, more so now as we're stuck at home living under Tier 3 restrictions. And trees in North Kensington, they really are a matter of life and death. The carbon emissions here are among London's highest. The RBKC Air Quality and Climate Change Action Plan has reported that 7.6% of all deaths in the Royal Borough are attributed to air pollution. And as you all know, life expectancy here in the Golborne ward is almost 10 years less than in the south of the borough. So the good air quality is now more acute. And we've got COVID-19 at the moment, which makes it more acute. Green spaces and trees are really vital in filtering out toxic particles. So every tree in the borough, and especially these 50-year-old mature London plane trees that you can find here on Warrington Green Estate, they will help the borough become carbon neutral by 2040. I believe that's a council commitment. Now, I'm a community artist, and I've had the unique privilege of working on social housing estates in North Kensington, and particularly value their green spaces and the trees located there. I regret to say that I've come to the town hall on 2 other occasions with residents from the estates presenting petitions. The first was in 2015, when Silchester Estate residents were protesting the proposed regeneration of their homes and green spaces. And more poignantly, the second time I came with Grenfell Tower residents to a scrutiny committee meeting when they asked the council to independently investigate the TMO over the regeneration of Grenfell Tower. I was shocked to hear about a month ago, without any real awareness in the community, that 42 trees, most of them 50-year-old trees, were going to be cut down in January as part of the next phase of redevelopment. There seemed to be no consultation of this. How is this possible in this day and age? It seems wrong on every level. Just imagine a resident of the borough walking along Warrington Road with their dog, where they might have walked for 40 years, and then one day, without any warning, all the trees in the area would have been cut down. Is this the type of regeneration that creates a sustainable community? And then I looked at the planning applications from Catalyst to try to understand this. And every single planning application, I think over 20 they've lodged with the council, the most recent being in October this year, all of them have a 2009 tree plan attached. This plan was never subsequently followed and is hopelessly out of date in terms of the information it contains. I question its legality as part of the planning process when the council has the legal right not to let development be carried out except in complete accordance with the details shown on submitted plans. It should include tree plans and updated environmental impact assessments. Can you please bring up the slide, Tom? We have created our own plan of what trees have already been lost. In phases 1 and 2A of the regeneration, 55 trees were removed and 10 retained, and just 26 new trees, saplings or like, were planted. Only 8 of those are in the public realm. You can remove the slide now, please. For the whole of the development, there will be 167 trees lost for the regeneration, and according to the 2009 plan, replaced by less than 50%. I don't know how the planning department and tree officer approved this at the time. Now, Catalyst, as I just said, have got a new plan. They've announced a plan to cut down 37 trees rather than 42. But we still think this is an environmental disaster for North Kensington. And they propose to plant 14 more new trees in the public realm. Well, they can't make up for the biodiversity and health benefit of these 40-year-old mature trees we have now. So what we want to say simply is plans can and must change. 40 years of growing can't. It's the council's vision and legal duty to create healthy, sustainable and resilient places for its residents, more so in the context of climate change. The council want to co-design new planning policies and put residents at the heart of everything you do. We're aware that RBKC are reviewing their planning applications to ensure that biodiversity is improved, not damaged by new building works. At the October 2020 meeting of the Environment Committee, Councillor O'Connor welcomed the protection of trees in the biodiversity plans you were revising. And the planning department's tree officers were going to advise on ways to ensure against loss of existing tree population. Well, we suggest they come and look at the 37 trees on Warnington Green Estate, which Catalyst are proposing to fell. Let me address Catalyst, who are here this evening. Catalyst Housing Limited own or manage 34,000 homes and have the book value of housing properties that stands at £3 billion. You have a corporate vision to build homes that people love and for them to be safe and sustainable. We can recommend how the retention of a row of trees on Bonchurch Road was a successful example of your design to integrate trees around new buildings. But residents have to live with the impact of Catalyst's actions that have resulted in the loss of so many mature trees during the first 8 or so years of regeneration. And now the impact of demolition, construction, and new roads that have been planned for Warnington Green in the next 10 years, new roads that will increase traffic flow, well, they're going to have a major environmental impact. We expect Catalyst and RBKC to monitor and measure and offset the carbon footprint of these building works and to think about the trees. Catalyst and RBKC tell us that the trees need to be cut down in order to build much needed homes. Well, phase 2B of the Warnington Green Estate regeneration, it proposes to remove 37 trees, and it will demolish over 100 social housing flats and build 230 new flats. But out of these 230 new flats, 108 will be social housing, 11 shared ownership, and 111 will be for private sale. So over half of the new homes will be for private sale. And if it is based on previous sales, which start at £600,000 for a 1-bedroom flat, does North Kensington need any more luxury flats? Who is benefiting from this development? Catalyst need to fund the regeneration. As a very rich limited company, it wouldn't put too much of a dent in their profits to build less luxury flats and put their resources into adapting their master plan into an innovative development that could build around the trees. So in summary, on behalf of all the local residents and wider community, I think this is a wonderful opportunity for the Royal Borough to show a new moral environmental and economic commitment that puts people before profits, and to champion the environment of their North Kensington residents rather than the 2010 master plan. Thank you. Perhaps you'd like to play the short film now about the beautiful trees on Mornington Green Estate.
Thank you. So I now call on Catalyst, Fergal O'Hara and Richard Smith to address the meeting. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Fergal O'Hara. I'm a regeneration manager for Catalyst Housing, and I oversee the coordination of the new build aspect of the regeneration at Warrington Green. So at Catalyst, we understand the concerns about the removal of trees, and we understand this is a particular concern at the moment when people are spending so much more time at home and in their local community, appreciating the local green space. Wherever possible, we avoid tree removal, and wherever we can, buildings and surrounding streets are designed around trees. Unfortunately, however, we do sometimes need to move or remove trees in order to build our homes. We accept and share the views of the petitioners that there is a climate emergency. However, we also recognise that there is a growing demand for modern, efficient housing in London. And in this phase of development 2B, we are building 230 homes, 108 of which are social rent homes. These homes will be constructed to national energy efficiency standards aimed to reduce environmental impact. In total, the project will deliver 538 new homes for social rent in one of the most expensive parts of the country, replacing homes that in the main are not befitting of today's standards. The new homes will be better quality and more energy efficient than the previous ones. We would never remove a tree without good reason, and there will be huge gains to the community of Warrington Green, aside from many more modern homes as a result of this regeneration. There will also be new community facilities, new public realm, and we are creating a new green space in partnership with RBKC, that's Athlone Gardens. The regeneration has also allowed us to generate nearly £1 million in community development projects since 2011. This includes a range of services and jobs and training opportunities, as well as after-school clubs and funds for the Venture Centre and more. The 3 plan for Warrington Green regeneration, showing which trees would be preserved and which would be removed and how they would be replaced, was agreed by the Council in 2010 as part of the outline planning consent. And one of the key principles of the master planning is that trees are one of the first things to be plotted on the proposed plans, and as many as possible should be retained. This would have been looked at carefully when the master plan was designed, and as other speakers have outlined, where possible we have designed buildings around existing trees in order to retain them, such as on Bonchurch Road and also in Athlone Gardens. In regards to consultation with local people, the master plan, it was publicised for public consultation as part of the planning application. And while we do appreciate that this was 10 years ago, the master plan does remain the blueprint for the regeneration. And we would also highlight that detail has been ratified in subsequent planning permissions approved in 2014, 2017 and 2019. We always look to engage with as many locals and key stakeholders as possible with our projects. And at Warrington Green, we've held numerous events, both online and in person, distributed hundreds of letters, and we have kept key project stakeholders updated with information and briefings. We also have the RSG, the Resident Steering Group, which we see as integral to the project in representing the views of the residents. The RSG helps us to finalise designs. They've recently had assist us with choosing a contractor for 2B, and they also assist us with keeping close to the community opinion. And we also support the RSG with an independent tenants advisor which we fund. At this stage of the project, we do our best to let the community know about what's happening, but welcome feedback on how this can be improved. So, as I done recently with the notice that we were to remove trees for the commencement of 2B, I've since listened, and Catalyst have since listened to the views of the residents since the announcement, and we have worked with the council to revisit the plans to look at whether we can retain more trees.
Mr. O'Hara, does Mr. Smith also wish to speak? Or are you just speaking to the meeting?
No, I'm just speaking for now, thank you.
Okay, all right, you've got about 2 more minutes to speak.
So having listened to the views of the residents, we have worked with the council to revisit plans, and I'm pleased to say that we propose to plant 14 new additional semi-mature trees in the public realm, bringing the total number of new trees to 69. And these plans are subject to agreement with the council. We're also looking to retain 2 existing trees on the scheme, and we are proposing to relocate 3 existing trees to Athlone Gardens Park. And as well as that, our design includes nearly half an acre of green roof that will increase carbon offsetting and help to mitigate the loss of trees that can be used by our local wildlife. So I hope that these revised proposals go some way to reassure residents that we do strive to retain trees and offset carbon footprint where possible. So I'll hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Hara. So I would now call on Councillor Thalasitis, if he could respond.
Thank you, Councillor Rossi. And can I start by thanking Constantine and Keith for bringing this petition, because I think it's a really important issue for North Kensington, and I'm certainly alive to it that we need to save as many trees as possible in Warnington. I do welcome the commitment to retain 2 additional trees and to plant some more, and I'm grateful to Fergal and his team for working with us on that. But I think the key thing I would say is that I know from campaigns in my own ward saving trees on Holland Park Avenue just how emotive and valued trees can be in a community, and that they can be a real green lung for a neighbourhood. So I strongly believe that we should work harder to protect more of the trees. I don't think we've got far enough yet. I think there's work to do. I would implore Catalyst to continue working with our officers so that we can save more of them over the coming weeks. Whilst there are clearly some good things in the scheme, and any additional social housing that we can get into the borough is clearly a good thing, I do in a sense, regret the fact that the permission was given 10 years ago with the tree strategy that's been described, because I would have preferred more trees to have been retained then. That does bind our hands slightly insofar as there's clearly no legal compulsion for Catalyst to act, but we do rely on them to do the right thing, to work with us now. The mood in the council and the leadership is certainly to protect amenity, to protect trees, and to support local residents in the north and across the borough. And I'm optimistic that we can go further still to that end. So hopefully that reassures Constantine and Keith that the climate emergency declarations, which I think were rightly made over the last 12 or 18 months, and that the work we're doing on biodiversity and other things are serious pieces of work for us, that we do care about them, and that part of that should be that where perhaps mistakes have been made or things have been missed in the past, we should do what we can to urge those with whom we work to redress the loss in trees and other green spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Thalasitis. So now I will take some questions. I'll start with one of my own, if I may, and this is really largely to Catalyst, to say, Mr. O'Hara, if you looked at your plans again, is there any way, looking at your plans, you could redraw them so that you could save some of the trees? That's for Mr. O'Hara.
Well, we have the commitment to deliver up to 1,000 homes on the scheme, and in 2B, in order to meet that commitment, we do need to develop and deliver a building mass that produces enough space to build 230 homes. So it is a small site, and we are constrained by Athlone Park to the south, and the railway to the east, and then Portobello Road to the west. So
would it be possible at all for some of the private homes just to build a few less in order to save some of the trees?
But that wouldn't resolve the fact that we still would need that building footprint in order to. It's the location of the trees. They're not on the peripheral. They're not on the peripheral location of the site. They're spread mostly within the centre. So it's difficult to locate buildings on that 2B site while accommodating the current locations of the trees, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. So now I will take questions from members of the committee. So Greg Hammond, I think, was the first, and then Janet Evans.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't sure I was the first, but anyway, I'm very happy to be called. My question is for either Councillor Thalasitis or the planning officers, because it's quite a technical one to educate me. I understand the planning permission for this development was given in 2010, but is it not the case that planning permissions have a time limit on them? And I didn't read anything about updates to that in the papers, although I noticed Mr. O'Hara did mention that there have been some updates, and I just wondered if they included permissions for the trees, or is it that because the development has already started, the planning permission is deemed to still be in existence because the building work has started? Could we have some a bit more depth and clarity on that, please?
Shall I answer, Councillor Rossi?
Yes, please.
Well, all I would say is my starting point would be that as commencement has happened, that we can't upend a planning permission that's already been given, much as we might like to, and I certainly would in respect to the trees. But there are probably officers in the room who can speak with more clarity and experience. They may even have been around when the scheme first came in.
So, Mr. Lamas, would you like to speak on that?
Yes, Thank you, Councillor Rossi. I'll just introduce myself first. So it's Martin Lomas. I'm the Strategic Developments Team Leader in the Planning and Place Service. So I'm obviously within the Planning Department. Planning permissions, effectively, once they have been implemented, they exist in perpetuity, and a developer can carry that planning permission out. So when we grant planning permission, they're subject to a condition that requires them to commence within 3 years. But if they do commence within that time period, then effectively the permission is then available to the developer in perpetuity to carry out that development in accordance with that planning permission.
Thanks very much. Much obliged to you both for your answers.
So I think I'll call now on Councillor Mason, who brought the petition to us.
Thank you, Chair. I was there in 2010, of course, at the Planning Committee, and I heard what Mr. Harris said about consultation on the master plan. Well, as it happened at the time, the consultation was a complete joke. Kensington Housing Trust, that morphed into Catalyst, had a history of having absolutely dreadful consultations that even the council at that time said were not sensible, we're not representative of what residents think. Now, I have the planning application in front of me, as it happens, because I was one of the objectors at the Planning Committee, and the planning application noted that there was a 540 signature petition against the application, and there were 53 other main objections, including the local councillors, and these were on 40 different main points. And these included, of course, the loss of trees, the removal of Athlone Gardens, because that was mentioned here, the road layout, and speeding traffic. The council has since had to spend resources and money on that. And so today, I doubt if that planning application would go through. And when we look at and I'm looking at the Section 106 header terms that's usually signed off on what applicants will agree to, there's everything else, but nothing about the reprovision of these trees, and the council agreed that, as the planning officer said, and I welcome Councillor Thalasiti's encouragement to Catalyst to save more trees. So this was a very hard-fought campaign with an entire estate and the Residents Association and the local amenity organisations and the councillors and other people against this application, which only went through in the casting vote of the chair. And it wasn't because people and residents didn't want better homes or didn't want a better area to live on. They simply didn't agree on 40 different principles, including the housing, the green space, the trees, and a whole plethora of other things, traffic. And they didn't agree that this was a plan that was going to better their lives or provide the housing, the social rent housing numbers that Mr. Hara has eloquently talked about. And Lady Hannam, who used to be the leader of the council for 11 years, she was a member of the planning committee, and she voted against the application, saying, I'm voting against because I do not believe this application is in the benefits of the people of Warrington Green. And it was tied, and it was agreed on the casting vote of the chairman, to the horror of everyone. So there was nothing in the heads of terms about these trees, and we made a big fuss at the time about the fact that Athlone Gardens was going to be erased and replaced, and it was going to take years and years for these trees to be knocked down. But the prevailing majority on the committee with the casting vote voted this, and we were horrified, because you can't cut down nearly 100 trees and not expect an environmental problem. So I think they should redraw the master plan. I think we are 10 years down the line. We have an environmental emergency, and we need more social housing, not private. The reason that they're building the 60% private housing, those numbers, is because they need to make the figures stack up financially. It's not about helping our people. Overwhelmingly, we need social rent housing in Goulburn, which is the poorest ward in England. So we do not need more housing for the rich there. So they have the planning application. They have the planning application. They have it, as the officer said, it's a legal document, And unless they deign to or agree to not cut down more trees and redraw, then they can go ahead and do this. We tried desperately over 5 years and in the last years of this application to stop this application and to stop the desecration of these trees and the green space. And we've failed because the council failed residents at that time. And that's what happened. But I think that they should redraw because they have a very unhappy community there and very unhappy councillors, and they are adding to the desecration of the environment. And I'm not persuaded by the soft platitudes of officers from Catalyst who are now speaking to you, who were not there then and who will be gone as soon as this development is built, leaving us with the mess that they created. So they should do something to recognise.
If we can get someone to respond, I don't know if Councillor Thalasitis would like to respond or Mr. Lomas. I mean, I think the situation is that the planning, I didn't know the history, so I'm grateful to you, Pat, for explaining all that to me, but it is what it is, and the planning permission has been given. So it's a question of how we can ask Catalyst really to reconsider what they're doing. Mr. Lomas.
Thank you, Councillor Rossi. I mean, I don't necessarily have much to add in terms of you just summing up there, and I think Councillor Mason also did touch on it in his statement and questions. Then that the planning permission has been granted, and it is a lawful planning permission, and Catalyst are within their rights to carry out that planning permission. Excuse me. And really it's down to trying to work collaboratively in collaboration with Catalyst to see what options we can do outside of the kind of enforceable aspects of the planning permission to see what additional benefits and mitigation we can get.
But I'm still opposed to this application, Chairman. I just want to make that clear. 10 years later, I'm still opposed to what is in this application that we opposed 10 years ago, and it's still a bad plan now for the residents and for the environment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Thalasitis, would you like to respond at all?
Well, only to reiterate that my understanding is that, alas, the permission that was given 10 years ago will probably stand, but I would certainly like it not to, and I'd like us to relook at the trees. So my own political direction to officers at Catalyst and at the council is to, however possible, retain trees, pull whatever levers they can. I certainly regret any loss of trees.
Can I give you a point of information?
Okay, very quickly, Judith, because we're still on the committee, but quickly, yeah.
Yeah, I was on that planning committee, and the only planning permission that was granted was outline planning permission, which was subject to an awful lot of amendment and consultation afterwards, and that included the question of the trees.
Okay, thank you, Judith. We can only go on what we're told by the planning officers. My understanding was that the trees were mentioned in the first planning consent, but I mean, that's what I've been told. I don't know, I wasn't there. So I think I'm going to bring in Councillor Taylor-Smith wishes to comment now, and then I'll go to the other members of the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I think first of all, just a slight point of detail is that this I'm very grateful that this petition has been brought to our attention by Constantine. And the first point of clarification, it was addressed to me and presented by Constantine. It wasn't actually a Pat Mason's petition. I know he read it out very helpfully at council, but it wasn't his petition, and I think that needs to be recorded. Okay. I think I'm also very grateful for that Catalyst have made efforts to try and look at this issue with trees, because we've heard tonight, and I completely support what Johnny's saying, is that we do cherish our trees. I think the other thing I would like to just mention until we look at what we might look at as a solution is that overall, in terms of this scheme, there are 3 phases, and this is phase 2B. And overall, the scheme will deliver more social housing on Warmington Green Estate that was originally there. And I think we've heard from Catalyst about that and the impact in terms of obviously having improved housing and what that does in terms of the environment. And I think we mustn't forget that. And we really are looking for as many socially rented homes as we possibly can, as Pat Mason has said. I think what I would like to try and explore, as Scathalus Halicitis have said, is that I think we have to look at all of the 37 trees. We've obviously seen an improvement from 42 down to 37, and I think they should be graded, and we should look if they can possibly be moved. And then the ones that can be moved, I'm really up for that. What we should be doing as a borough is adopting these trees and finding where they can be moved to, because it might be that 37 trees can't all go in Athlone Gardens, but I'm sure there are lots of other parts in the borough where they could go and they could be preserved. And I think that's something that I would very much welcome us exploring with Catalyst and through our own arboriculturalist team, to actually look at those trees and see how many can be saved.
Thank you. I will now call on Councillor Lindsay.
Yeah, my question, Chairman, I've got a couple, but the first one is, I'd like Catalyst to explain the nature of their consultation with residents and others living close to the relevant area in Warmington Green Estate over the last couple of years in general and the last year in particular. Because, and I just say this as a general observation, when I have planning issues in my ward, typically the person who is putting in the application testifies that they have spent great amount of time consulting with their neighbours who are going to be affected. The reality is that the neighbours don't believe a word of it. So I wonder if you could just expand what you have done to consult over the last couple of years.
Mr. O'Hara, if you could answer.
Yeah, so, well, I've been working with Catalyst on Warmington Green for this past 2.5 years, coincidentally. And in that time, we have had numerous public events. We had what we called the Party in the Park, Athlone Gardens Park, where we presented our proposals for phase 3. We have also had consultation evenings in Portobello Hall on the Warmington Green Estate in relation to consultation and proposals of designs for Athlone Gardens Park in collaboration with RBKC. And we had a weekend event in Portobello Hall regarding further consultation following the Party in the Park for phase 3 design proposals. And in addition to that, we have monthly meetings with the RSG, the Resident Steering Group, where we endeavour to keep the RSG abreast of upcoming proposals and actions on the scheme. And then in addition to that, I strive with my communications team to keep the locals updated as to what is happening in terms of construction. So anything that we believe will have an impact on the residents' well-being is communicated via letters and newsletters. So that's what we endeavour to do.
No, thank you. Can I just ask, Chairman, can I ask another question, please?
Yes, you may.
My question is to Constantine. I hope I got your name pronounced right. Does what Mr. O'Hara has said bear any resemblance with your experience of the consultation that you alluded to in your opening speech, please?
I would probably bring in Keith here if Keith is still on the line, because I work in and around the area. So Keith will be directly relevant. I should say that Keith resigned from the resident steering group a month ago when he heard about the when it was announced that the trees were going to be cut. So perhaps Keith can come in here.
Keith, are you still with us?
You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes, I was a member of the steering group and have recently resigned over this business with the trees. I was a member of that steering group for many, many years. And the consultations that took part were basically paying lip service to the residents on Mornington Green. As far as I'm concerned, they weren't really, the catalysts were going to do whatever they were going to do. As far as the steering group was concerned, the membership of the steering group is mainly about 4 to 5 people, and it doesn't really represent the whole of the estate. And I've argued that this for quite a while, that more people should have been involved in that particular organisation, the steering group, but people just didn't want to belong to it because they didn't believe what they were hearing in these things. So basically, when they said that they were going to cut down these trees, I was totally horrified, absolutely horrified. And I thought, no, I'm not going to sit in a room with people who are going to do this sort of damage to my environment.
Thank you.
My comment, Chairman, is it just seems to me to be abundantly clear that Catalyst have not taken their residents with them.
I agree. I think that the whole thing, it's a 10-year-old planning commission, and yet people are saying they only just found out in November that this is going to happen. And, something in terms of communication has obviously gone very badly wrong. So anyway, I'm going to call Councillor Evans now. She has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say that I thought Kim Taylor-Smith's idea to move the trees elsewhere is a good idea, because what I read in the papers is that if we move them on this estate or plan, they will not survive, and that would be really sad. But then following that idea, I would like to ask Mr. O'Hara and Constantine, Mr. O'Hara, how would you mitigate on that loss of the trees? Because people do need, especially now, they need a psychological environment of beauty. And what can you give in terms of a happy space? And Constantine, would you be happy with that?
Well, in terms of happy space, what we are proposing is two blocks of flats which are encirculated by trees in the public realm. So there's trees surrounding the 2 blocks. And in addition to that, there within each block there is a courtyard whereby residents of the blocks can look out upon gardens which are below at ground level. And then in addition to that, we see the Athlone Gardens Park as a the potential jewel in Mornington Green, where at the end of the regeneration it will be a public green space for all to enjoy on Mornington Green and in the surrounding area.
And Constantine,
yeah,
would you be? Yes. Do you feel that would help?
Of transplanting the trees for me doesn't sound very good. I mean, these trees are here, they're Mornington Green trees, and they are quite fragile and precious. So, indeed. I mean, a very last resort to contemplate doing that. I would imagine that an environmentally sensitive architect who would be connected to the scheme could look at this plan, attempt to build the new blocks around the site of what's here. So we have the ability of building what's here as a footprint, and that might give us the ability to try to build around the trees. Now, I don't think it's rocket science to look into that, and I wish that would be explored. It just seems to be that people often come into an area, and developers, and they just want to erase what's there and not take stock of the value of what's there. I think Keith would be a good person to bring in briefly now, because he lives directly opposite a lot of the green spaces here. I don't know if Keith wants to.
the green spaces of around what we have at the moment are quite precious to us. We really do need them. Everybody on my estate here, we talk about it all the time, how much we love our trees, how much we love the wildlife that lives in those trees, and how much we have squirrels and birds and all sorts living in those trees. And it is a wonderful thing to get up in the morning and go and see these things when you're going out to work in the morning. They'll all be gone. That'll all be gone. We won't have that. And that will take away from our environment. And our environment will be degraded by this. And, you know, what are we doing? I mean, I can remember that years ago there was a song about putting trees in a tree museum. Is that where we're going? I'm going to have to pay to go and see trees? This is an absolute disgrace. These trees are precious to us and must be retained in some form or another.
Thank you. I'll now call on Councillor Pascal.
I wanted to follow up on what Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith said, but to ask Catalyst specifically as to whether they would be open to the approach that he put forward, which I understood to mean looking again at the trees that are proposed to be cut down, seeing if there can be any modifications of the design to allow them to, some of them to stay, to move others, and to move the ones that can't be moved locally elsewhere. But also I'd ask if we could look at more trees being planted of a similar species, because I think, as Constantine pointed out, the London plane trees have certain specific attributes. Now, these ones are old and magnificent, but we also need to look towards planting the plane trees of the future, which it won't be a one-for-one exercise. We'd need to plant several trees for each one, that if some have to be taken down. Now, it seems to me in this situation there is no answer that will fulfill what Catalysts want to do and what they've got planning permission to do on one hand, and what the residents, through particularly the two people who brought this petition, have expressed on the other hand. But what Councillor Lindsay pointed out is that what is missing from here is some kind of working together. And I think that what Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith suggested was a very good suggestion towards that possibility. And my question is really as to whether Catalyst would be prepared to look at it seriously and to put some money behind it, to put it bluntly.
Mr. O'Hara, would you like to answer that first?
Yeah, so, and in relation to what Constantine said, I have been working with a team of architects and landscape architects and structural engineers over the past month, and we are not just brushing the concern aside. We have investigated the layout of the building and the availability of public realm, but the problem is that these trees were planted with the estate, and therefore they are intertwined into the existing layout of the existing buildings. So it's almost impossible to, aside from build the buildings in the same layout, to build around those trees. What I would like to add is that, yes, we are recognising the significance of the London plane species, and the additional trees that we are proposing in the streetscape, we are planning to plant those as London plane.
I think if I may, Madam Chairman, if I could ask part of the question which I don't feel has been answered. The part of the question I don't think has been answered is Catalyst prepared to take on board the suggestion that Councillor Taylor-Smith made with regard to reassessing the trees, looking at those that are able to be moved locally preferably, but if not within the borough, and for there to be additional extra London plane semi-matures planted in addition to what's been reported so far. And would Catalyst be prepared not only to do that, but to do it in conjunction with a conversation with borough officers and local residents, and put some money behind that so that this can be made to happen?
Okay, yeah, we would be prepared, subject to consultation and approval of the various departments at RBKC, to increase the number of trees to be relocated into Athlone Gardens Park.
And also to plant some extra new ones.
Well, we feel we're at the capacity in terms of planting additional new ones on the street. The root systems and the daylighting and issues that additional trees might create to the new buildings would become a factor if we were to increase the number of trees.
So you're prepared to look at it. The question is, are you prepared to look at it with the borough officers, but also with the local residents? Because as Councillor Lindsay said, one of the key missing components here is a meaningful consultation with local residents on this particular issue. There does not seem to be a meeting of minds, and it is essential, as far as I can see from outside this situation, that there is some more communication, real communication. And whilst neither party is going to get absolutely everything that they want, at least if the is there now, to the best of all the capabilities involved.
Thank you. I'll call Councillor Chowan now.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Essentially, my question was about transplanting trees as well, essentially was asked by Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith and Councillor Pascal. So I'll just ask specifically, Fergal, about only 3 trees were identified when Catalyst spoke to specialist contractors. And this it was written in section 3.16 that this is being explored, implying that it hasn't been explored. And just to pick up on Councillor Pascal's request, could we see more exploration and see if more than 3 trees can be identified to transplant in Athlone Gardens, or for that matter, as Kim Taylor-Smith said, that Councillor Taylor-Smith has said that we could adopt in the wider borough? A question for Fergal.
Yes, we would be prepared to explore that further.
Okay, Councillor Blakeman, do you wish to make another comment?
Yes, I want to ask a question and make a comment, if you don't mind. Well, first of all, my question is that we heard today that the regulator of social housing has just downgraded Catalyst's financial position. So I am concerned that we have no guarantee either that this development will ever finish, because it's already been delayed, or that, you know, after the trees have been destroyed. This destruction of trees goes against all the council's new policies. And I would like to also give you a word of warning, and Constantine did mention the petition to stop the destruction of Silchester Estate, and that actually happened, thank God, but only because of the Grenfell tragedy. But the part of Silchester Estate that was redeveloped and led to the destruction of trees and the creation of the courtyard that Mr. O'Hara mentioned, the courtyard is too small, and in winter it doesn't get enough light, and it has actually become a mud bath with dying plants rather than flourishing plants. And I would like also to ask him whether these courtyards that he mentioned are actually going to be large enough to encompass any of these trees.
Yes, our landscape architect has carried out the appropriate analysis, and the species of plants and trees within those courtyards will receive sufficient light to grow sufficiently.
So they're going to be smaller trees, not plain trees?
within the courtyards, yeah, there will be smaller trees.
Okay.
It's the public realm trees that we will be bringing forward as London Plain.
I mean, I take Councillor Pascal's point about planting plane trees of the future, but I don't think that you have a plan here to plant the plane trees of the future, and I don't think those you plant or those that you move will flourish in any.
Mr. Horrocks?
Sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
I think Councillor Blakeman, I think she's lost connection, but I think she was asking about the trees you wish to plant. Are they plane trees? What trees do you envisage planting now?
And also that they won't flourish in the kind of courtyard situation that he's described, because that was promised at Silchester Estate and that didn't happen there either.
Right. Well, on the public realm, so on the streets surrounding Block 6, Phase 2A, our intention is to plant London Plain trees. So the new trees on the new footpaths will be London Plain trees. Now, within the courtyard areas, there will be smaller species of trees, garden type saplings and shrubbery that will create green space and natural habitat. And they will not be of they will be of a size that is befitting to the amount of light coming into those areas. We can't plant London Plain in those courtyards because London Plain grow to a large size that would then interfere with the buildings.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak? I can't see any other hands up. Speak up if you do, or I'll move on to some of the residents now. Okay, so Christine Dingle, who's a member of the resident steering group at Warnington Green Estate, would like to speak. Christine?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I haven't really got anything to add to what's been said. I think everything needs to be re-looked at and reassessed and replanned. And I think it's just so devastating and upsetting to think about cutting these trees down that have had all that time to grow and be part of our lives. And those badges on them, like the badge of death, is horrific.
Okay. Abbas, would you like to say something now from Lancaster West?
Yes, please. Good evening, everyone. Abbas Dadu from Lancaster West. I think I put most of the blame on Planning Permission Department. I think you guys need to put a brave face and come up with more ambitious view. Basically, what happened, this view of looking at us and our community as like a commodity, these companies, they come and build and they go. You guys supposed to be our guardians. Even right now, the Planning Permission Department, they have their eyes on our bit of land on our estate between two blocks. It's like 200 square meter of grass. And when we had meeting with somebody from Planning Department, as an architect, calling that a green space is a useless bit of green. No, we had 4 beautiful palm trees there, over 20 years old, and that green space is very vital to us. And they want to build a nursery or a stay and play between 2 blocks, forcing a building and leaving like 4 meter gap this side and 4 meter gap that side between the 2 other blocks. So I can really understand and feel their pain, what's happening there. I welcome moving the trees and saving them, but how about that area? We're talking about that 10, 15 years gap, between the people's life expectancy. You guys need to dig in what are the reasons, and I'm sure that's part of the reason, and you need to make sure to narrow down, the gap. So by all means, these companies who make huge money on our expenses and the community, who we've been through a lot, especially since 2017 June, they need to properly make plans, and like Judith mentioned, they build it and they leave it, and nothing happens on that Silchar Estate new development. That's from me. Thank you.
Right. So I'll call on Isis Amlak. I don't know if I pronounced that properly. If you would like to speak.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, yeah, I'm Isis. You did pronounce that correctly. I'm a local resident. I live in Norland Ward. I just wanted to agree with much of what's been said, actually, and the ideas that the councillors and my fellow residents have put forward about preserving the trees. For me, I agree very much with what was said by Christine Dingle, actually, which is that the plan to me does not seem that it's any longer fit for purpose. 2010 was a long time ago, and as we all know, one of the things that Grenfell Tower atrocity has shown us is that it's vital that communities are listened to. And I believe there is a commitment from the council that we would do things differently, and that going forward, the voice of residents, particularly in the north of the borough, would be heard far more loudly, should we say.
Yeah.
The issue for me is that when I think about where I live in Norland, which is sort of just near Holland Park Avenue and near Holland Park, there's so much greenery around, there's so many trees. And the further you get into wards in the north, particularly Golborne, there is already a lack of trees present and a lack of green space. The impact of environmental damage from the Grenfell Tower atrocity was found present in many spaces. It was something like, I can't remember how many meters we knew that these chemicals traveled, and contaminants were found in the soil. The trees are vital. I was looking up some surveys and how many thousands of tons of pollution the trees remove every year, that the impact that they have, how they prevent and intercept rainfall, again avert the risk of flooding. They store millions of tons of carbon, which we need for our health and well-being. As people have already said, psychologically, trees are important. So there's the physiological, there's a psychological, and also the public realm. It's just more beautiful with trees. And I would say that, I've sort of looked into it as well. A clever, committed architect will find a way to build around the trees and incorporate them into modern building designs. And that would they call it a tree human cohabitation system. So I would suggest that the architects and that Catalyst go back to the drawing board and look at how they can incorporate this. Councillor Blakeman made a really good point about the failure of previous plans because of the length of time. It's been years since Catalyst began building this estate. If they knock the trees down or destroy the trees or kill the trees in January, how long before final development happens? Surely it would be better to wait, to stay it, and to revise it. And also, my question to Catalyst is, could you evidence to us how you have taken the impact of the Grenfell Tower atrocity and all the multiplicity of issues that it's caused into consideration in your plans? Can you evidence that? Because I would be horrified to think that this plan went through 10 years ago, Grenfell happened 3 years ago, and no one sat down at Catalyst and reconsidered how they're going forward.
Mr. O'Hara, would you like to address that point? And then I think I'll bring this section of the meeting to a close. Mr. O'Hara?
Yeah, well, I'd like to say that we and I recognise the sensitivities in North Kensington, especially since the Grenfell tragedy, and that's why we have a commitment to keeping residents informed and keeping residents involved in our activities. We don't. We're transparent in what we plan to do.
That's not really an answer as to what you've actively
No, I'm sorry, but keeping residents informed is not engaging with the residents, and you don't have to live there afterwards, after you've destroyed all these trees. We have a salutary example on Silchester Estate where they put in small trees, as you said, and none of them flourished because of the lack of light, and they've now got a mud patch.
Residents have just been palmed off as usual with platitudes and answers off crib sheets. You think we are stupid. You think our residents were stupid 10 years ago, and you think that they have nothing in their heads now. They can be palmed off with any old story. That's what residents said 10 years ago. That's what they're saying now. Councillor Blakeman is right. Being informed what's going to happen is not consultation, and that's what happened 10, 15 years ago. Residents were told effectively what was going to happen, and if they didn't agree with it, they were sidelined. And that's what happened. Around long enough, and people like you will be gone just in a couple of years, leaving us with the mess behind environmental and trees cut down, etc. You'll move on to some other project. We hear this. We hear these stories all the time from people like you. In 5 years' time, you won't be here. You'll not be here. You'll leave us with the mess. You'll leave the council with the mess.
I think now I would like to thank everyone who has come, especially the residents, and told us how much they love the trees and how important they are to them. To sum up, I have something really to say to address Catalyst, and that is something has gone very badly wrong here. You've got a planning permission, which by the sounds of it, you got by the skin of your teeth 10 years ago. You have not been engaging with the residents. And something I learned a long time ago, I used to work for the Urban Regeneration Agency. And rule number 1 of regeneration is you don't impose it. It's got to be bottom up. You have got to take people with you. And it really seems in this instance that that is not happening. So I would urge you, Catalyst, to go and look at your plans again and just see, by building a few less houses, flats, whatever, that you can actually save some of those trees, because that is what the residents want. And as they have said, they are the ones who are going to live there for years to come. And, you know, Catalyst cannot just dump, a project on residents and expect them to be happy about it, because they would like to keep their trees. So my sympathies are with the residents. I would urge you, Catalyst, to look again, because it can't be right that you have this level of protest against what you are doing, and that you have not engaged with people, you know, down the years. And this is a very old planning application. Anyway, so
well said.
Thank you everyone who has participated in this part of the evening. I'm afraid we now have to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is about the environmental checks.
Chairman, can I ask a question first?
Yes, okay.
On the on page A4, under recommendations, it says to consider the report and decide whether the committee wishes to make any comments or recommendations to the leadership team on the matters raised by the petition.
Yes.
Do we want to send anything to the leadership team?
Yes, I think we would like to make a recommendation to Catalyst and to the leadership team. I mean, the thing is, there is a legal binding thing here that, you know, that we can't, you know, but as I said, we can recommend to the leadership team everything I've said, and we can recommend to Catalyst. So I'm quite happy to do that. But really, it's Catalyst that have got to shift, I think.
Agreed. Fully agreed.
Okay. So moving on. Thank you, everyone, and thank all the officers as well who've come today. This is a report by Stephen Brown. It's about the land contamination that may have happened after the fire at Grenfell Tower. And I would like to ask Stephen Brown to introduce it. I have to say at the outset that this investigation has been done by the government and not by the council. But Stephen Brown will introduce it, I'm sure, better than I have.
Thank you. Yes, this report is an update on the stage 2 of the environmental checks programme, which, as you say, is overseen by a multi-agency and MHCLG. It covers the community engagement aspects of stage 2, sampling, and the results timetable. And the committee is asked to note the progress in the report and to note that a further report on the results will come in due course. The report covers all of the background of this, but just to remind committee members that it was in October 18 that the government proposed that there should be a programme of environmental checks to investigate the risks to human health from potential contaminated land as a result of the fire. The whole thing is overseen by a multi-agency partnership and coordinated by MHCLG. A scientific advisory group was set up to oversee stage 1, and that was chaired by the government's chief scientific advisor. Stage 1 identified no unacceptable risks. It did, of course, identify that the soil was indeed contaminated, as of course much of London's soil is, but it didn't consider that there were unacceptable risks in particular with regard to this soil. However, it did recommend, or the multi-agency partnership recommended, progressing to a more in-depth stage 2 process to reduce any of the uncertainties about the risks to health. And that is what has been progressing with some difficulty, of course, with COVID over the last few months. So the report details the community engagement activities that have been carried out. There were 2 events in particular since July, both of which were videoed and recorded and are publicly available. There were 4 environmental check community updates, and there were walkovers in August and September, again with some difficulty because of COVID, but the community were invited to join in with walkovers with ACOM, the successful contractor that is carrying out the work. The full design for stage 2 and what was involved in stage 2 sampling and the contaminants that were being looked for is available in a link in the report. Samples were taken from 39 areas between 22nd of October and the 19th of November, and a full list of those areas is appended at Appendix 1. It is likely that we'll get results in January. So the multi-agency partnership will review those results in February, and with a view to there being a full public report in April. And of course, the results will be brought to this committee. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. So I will take questions. Councillor Pascal, you have your hand up. Councillor Pascal.
I apologise, that's an old hand from the previous discussion.
Okay. Do you wish to ask a question on this?
No, as far as I understand it, that this is still a work in progress and we're awaiting the report in the early next year. So I presume that this subject will come back to this committee with more detail. Is that right?
Indeed, yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hammond, correct.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested to know what contingency plans are being made just in case these stage 2 samples show an unexpected and unacceptable level of contamination, please.
Thanks, Councillor. I don't think we've actually made plans yet in terms of what we would do. We'd need to wait to see what contaminants in fact were identified. We are used to dealing with contaminated land. Every planning application, of course, requests background checks on contaminated land, and decontaminating land is something that we are quite used to doing. I've also got our principal pollution officer on the line as well, Rebecca Brown. I'll ask Rebecca if she knows if there's any contingency plans specifically in place to deal with pollution from following stage 2.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Brown's right. We are waiting for the results of stage 2, but we are following the process under the Part 2A of the Environmental Protection Act. So if land is identified as being contaminated, then there is a pathway to follow that is set out, and ultimately the council would have to make the decision based on the advice contained within stage 2 as to whether we would determine the land as contaminated. But that is a very long way from where we are right now, and it wouldn't be right at this stage to speculate. So yes, we await the results, and then we will take it from there.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll call on Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure Councillor Blakeman could probably comment more than I could on this, but as one of those people who was present on the night of the fire and for the at least 2 or 3 days afterwards, when there was a huge plume of smoke just spreading across the area. And then we went through the stage 1 and all the different meetings, and some of the scientists that came to those meetings giving the results that a lot of residents didn't agree with or contested. They mentioned all kinds of different chemicals that they had been told may have come from the tar because of the makeup of the materials pouring out. They were told that these chemicals could very well have been in the soil, but given the length of time it took to actually do the contamination investigation, that they may these chemicals may no longer be in the soil, or they may be in people's bodies, and in years to come they may well suffer some diseases from that. So now we're at stage 2, and they're investigating. It says here whether there's asbestos, dioxins of furans, and polychlorinated biphenyls in the atmosphere. So the question really is, some people said then we need to be testing the actual people who live in the area to find out if they've got those chemicals in their bodies, which we know can be in your bodies for 20, 30 years, because it did take a long time to get this going. So that's a real problem. People could be contaminated with something, but the soil doesn't say so now. And some of the scientists who came in and told us about the stage 1 said so. So I don't know whether we should be testing people as well, and for what, and they should know for what. Thank you, Chair.
I think that's right, Pat, and this came up at a meeting in March, and people are actually more concerned really about it. It is contaminated land, but it's the health aspect, and there's also the issue of what people actually breathed in on the night of the fire, and so I think we need to really look at this in another way. I haven't had a chance to discuss it with Marwan, but maybe we should try and have a paper looking at the health aspects of what this tragedy has done. And I mean, the difficulty is because now we're in pandemic mode. That's not something testing. I agree. I think people should be tested, biometric testing and all the rest of it. But we're kind of in a pandemic at the moment, so it's going to be hard to go to NHS England and demand that a lot of people get tested. But I still think we should actually start to look into this in the health aspect and looking at the people. Anyway, I'm going to call Dr. Chowan first because he's a doctor. Dr. Chowan. Max?
Well, thank you very much, Chair. My question is, it is a technical question, and it probably is health kind of impact related. It's about the sampling program itself. I noticed that there was thorough testing, and it was interesting to see the preliminary results. But my question is the testing program a standard package, or is this something bespoke for this particular environment, this particular area? 444 samples, typically 10 from each site. I mean, is this standardized practice, or is this bespoke? So my question was to Mr. Brown, but I think he's lost connection, or is he back?
I'm back, thanks, Chair. Right. Again, I'll answer, but I'll then defer to Rebecca, who's got far more detailed knowledge of this. But it was very much a bespoke stage. We don't normally go to stage 2. It's very unusual for us to go to this in depth when we're looking at contaminated land. But there was a lot of consideration given to what chemicals should be looked for, what contaminants should be looked for, and specifically we were looking for contaminants that would be there as a result of the fire. So I think if you look at the report, you will see the detail in there of which contaminants have been looking for. But maybe again, Rebecca, if you could come in on that and just offer some help. So
yes. Sorry, Rebecca, just is more about what's the standardized process in situations like this? What you normally do in the industry? And yes, I've seen the results. I've read the reports, and I've seen that lead seems to be coming out more, but amongst the London average. But yes, please, Rebecca, carry on.
So for every Part 2A site investigation, you would look at the scenario that you are testing for. This is an incredibly detailed investigation, and right at the beginning it was agreed that this would be a 2-stage process, where in stage 1 it would be a pilot study in one particular area and then some samples elsewhere, and that information would be used to inform stage 2. So this is a very bespoke designed investigation, which has got several layers of review and assurance built into it, so that we can be confident with the results, with the design and the results which we are provided with.
Okay, well that's helpful. Thank you.
Councillor El-Nagi, Marwan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with you. We need to see the health implication of this of the phase 1, even before we move to phase 2. So I would like to see a more detailed aspects of this work to be in a user-friendly way being communicated to our residents, because I know that there are some of the samples being taken from kitchen gardens, for example, where people grow foods, and they consumed for the last 2 years at least. We have, I mean, it's, we want to know what kind of communication is being done with residents as well, those who are not just breathing, but as well consuming the products, because I believe there are some quite few samples from kitchen gardens. So I would like to see that's being highlighted as well. And then better communication. And I think I agree with you that we need to look in details on a paper on the health implication of this one, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Would you like to answer that, Mr. Brown?
No, I completely understand, though, that it's because the whole point of this is to see if there are any health implications. That's clearly, first of all, we need to understand if actually the land is contaminated, and then if we discover that actually it is, or the soil is contaminated, we need to look at what the health implications of that might be. So I completely understand that, but that would have to be the subject of a different report and a different analysis. This report is about investigating to see whether the soil is contaminated or not, and not to look at the health implications. But of course, completely understand that, as I say, if we discover it is, then that report would need to be done with all haste.
Thank you. Do any other members of the committee wish to ask a question? Okay, so I'll go on to Councillor Blakeman. Judith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I've been involved very much with these environmental checks, and so have a huge number of members of the local communities. And I don't think it's so much the environmental checks that worry us. Our concern relates to, and I want to reinforce this point, you've made it yourself, is what people actually breathed in on the 10 days after the fire, because what was breathed in then is very different to what has settled on the land. And every time I ask about this, I get fobbed off. And I do agree with you that we really do need a report on the health implications of this. I mean, I had one neighbour whose whole house, whose whole flat was completely covered in sticky brown and black soot from the fire, and she was away at the time. And when she asked the council for help, she was given no advice, no guidance whatsoever. And I do worry also, and Marwan made the point, I mean, I've been feeding rhubarb crumble to my neighbours, grown less than 200 metres from the fire, and we have changed the soil now, but we didn't initially.
Okay. I'll ask David O'Connell. I think he wishes to speak, to say something.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was first of all to say that we've been really helped in this by Councillor Ansaron, and we have actually managed to obtain an independent expert to help us on the whole of this study, because as you can understand, a lot of the issues of the soil contamination are very technical, and we didn't quite feel that all of the public meetings that have been held had really put across the point or had been designed to help us understand what the findings were. One of the first points he made was that with the level 1 contamination that was reported in the first stage, I'm sure Mr. Brown can confirm, you wouldn't normally bother having a second phase investigation at all, and that it was extremely unlikely that we would get to a level in the next phase where they would actually look to do any kind of mitigation, removing the soil or cleaning up the area. So, and he said basically because the sort of toxins, he has got experience with fires, he said these sort of toxins released in these fires would have evaporated or disappeared if traces in the soil. I know they are doing some sort of test which they think might possibly pick up those sort of toxins, but it's all very hit and miss. And I think really it would have been much cheaper just to take away all the soil in the surrounding area and mitigate the issue, clean up the buildings, because that's something that didn't really happen at all, apart from paint jobbing the walkways where I live. But doing that would have been cheaper and then reassured people much quicker if it happened straight away. Now it's 3.5 years on and it's really late. So the only way really to give people reassurance of what's happened is to do proper toxicology tests. All the way through this, we've been pushing for toxicology tests, and there's been quite some advice from Professor Steck about what kind of things to test for, which is one of the reasons we were told for the soil sampling. So I'd like to say, can we focus more on getting some toxicology tests for our residents? We've already been asking for that from the ministry. And could Mr. Brown perhaps answer that we don't think we'll probably find much here, but that it would be worth mitigating the soil and surrounding areas, because not all of them have been, Judith, and just to reassure people, because that's what this is really about. All this money that's being spent on these tests and elaborate investigation, it's just a way of fobbing people off and reassuring them, and they would still not feeling reassured. That's the main point.
Yes, I know that the soil has not been replaced in all sorts of places, particularly in the private sector.
Mr. Brown, would you like to answer that?
Well, I completely understand the issue about reassurance. I mean, stage 1 didn't discover anything in particular of real concern, but that didn't really offer the reassurance that everybody's looking for. And I doubt if stage 2 will either. I mean, London soil is contaminated. When we discovered it was contaminated, of course it was, but we're looking for specific contamination with regard to the fire. So stage 2, I don't think is a waste of time, because we are specifically looking now for evidence of any particular contaminants that were there due to the fire itself. But I will certainly take away the fact that you're looking for toxicology tests, But I know from meetings that I've been at that's been discussed many times, and there's been medical opinion on that. But that's way beyond my brief tonight. I'm here to talk about the contaminated soil, but I will take it away, of course, and I will make sure that our public health colleagues are aware that those are the concerns that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councillor Mason, you have your hand up. Is that an old hand or a...
Sorry, it's an old hand, Chairman.
Okay. So I don't see that anyone else wishes to speak on the matter. So I think, yes, listening to everything that's been said, I think we have to now, I mean, it is important to look at the land to see if it's contaminated and looked at in that sort of narrow way. But I think we maybe should shift our focus a bit. Someone's trying to speak? I don't know.
No, it won't be. It's a charade. It's rubbish. Anyway.
So, yeah, so I think we have to try and focus on the health aspects of this and maybe look at getting a paper that would go to the adult social care and health, and also to recommend, actually, we can recommend that we have toxicology testing so that people can get tested. Okay, thank you. So move on now to the next one, which is the financial impact of COVID.
I'm going to leave the meeting now.
Councillor Mary Wheel, would you like to introduce the report, or Taryn?
Sorry, I'm just trying to sort my okay. I think Taryn is going to introduce it, and then I was going to, if that's all right, just add a little bit at the end.
Okay, fine. Thank you, Taryn.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chair. So this is just a short update on the financial impact of COVID-19. We know that select committees are already talking about the impact on individual services in a bit more detail, and particularly from a service delivery perspective. So this particular note is much more about the financials. So the detail is set out in the report, and I'll just run through a couple of headlines before I pass over to Mary. So since the start of the pandemic, we've had quite a robust process in place to monitor the impacts of COVID, partly because we need to do a monthly return to government in terms of the pressures that we're kind of experiencing, but also, and more importantly, to understand the impact on our position and how we might manage them. So like I say, so the detail is in the report. So the headline, I guess the headline at the moment is the latest information shows that we are heading towards a pressure for the year of about 36 million on the general fund, about 1.5 million at this stage on the HRA. And we've also got an estimated 11.2 million deficit from reduced collection of business rates and council tax. We are in particularly volatile times, and I don't think we've yet seen the evidence for the full impact of both the national restrictions, so between the 5th of November and the 2nd of December, and also we know, I think we're all seeing quite likely that we're in for a tricky few months over the remainder of the financial year. So we will be keeping a close eye like we have been already, and I think it's probably quite helpful for this particular committee to maybe receive some regular updates throughout the rest of the year. So just before I pass over to Mary, so in terms of government funding, just to summarise where we are on that. So we've received at this stage 16.3 million in grants, and also we are expecting to get an estimated 9 million from the income compensation scheme. So that's really about the loss of fees and charges that we've experienced over the last year. We are going to be proposing that we use some of our corporate contingency, and I think we've been saying that throughout the year. And we have also got, and you'll kind of see that in the latest monitoring reports that go to leadership team, there are a couple of business as usual budgets that are underspending. So everything else being equal, and I say that quite, I say that in the sense that probably everything won't be equal. We should be in a position to manage the pressures, but kind of what I've suggested earlier, we are in for some really uncertain kind of few months ahead of us. So I would be very surprised if that 36 million stayed the same. I think we are expecting that to change. We may receive further funding, we don't know, but we might have to think about other options, including savings and possible use of reserves. But we're keeping a very close eye. So we're currently, finance team is currently working on kind of Q3 position and what have you. So we are, I think we've got the best insight that we can. So we'll keep you updated as a committee. Very last word before I pass over to Mary. So certainly the funding that I've talked about up until now is funding that 36 million of pressures that I've just talked about. However, as a council, we have received quite a few other ring fence grants that are mainly around dealing with our response to the pandemic. So this is much more about the additional responsibilities that we've picked up, such as test and trace and some of all the testing that we'll be doing going forward. So they aren't included in the kind of position that I've given you, but we have received that funding. And in a similar vein, we're keeping a very, very close eye on what we're spending against those. So hopefully that is helpful. I think it is going to change, and I don't think it'll probably be unhelpful to bring kind of an update to you as we move through the next couple of months. And on that note, I'll pass over to Mary and then we can open up for questions.
I think Taryn has really clearly, and the paper does, laid out what the impact's been so far. I just really wanted to make a couple of points, and one is that I think this really shows this whole set of unknowns has really shown the importance of being absolutely on top of budget monitoring and budgets at all times. And I really want to thank our finance team for what has been a really amazingly unprecedented year, because I've always felt very informed and as if, you know, there's a strong set of controls here which we really need more than ever before. And I think possibly the other comment I wanted to make is that you know, the government the government have given us more money than, to be honest, I expected that we would get at the very beginning of all this. But what they've given us does also assume that we are going to put council tax up as well, so that the offset and the final position does assume a certain level of council tax rise in an environment where everybody's feeling the pressure. On the other hand, as a council, we are still committed, and I don't expect that to change, to the full council tax relief scheme for residents who are really under pressure. So those are the two things I wanted to add. In fact, Taryn and I are very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mike. Could I start with a question, which is, I believe we have in reserves now about £100 million, some of which is earmarked. Now, on page 5, you say that you can't rule out using reserves in 21, 22, but just for short term. I mean, how close are we to needing to do that?
Yeah, so I probably should have said that in my update. So I think certainly the headlines that I've shared with you today are really about what's happening in the current year. We are also keeping a very close eye on what's going to happen in 21, 22. So there is likely to be some knock-on effect in terms of financial pressures for 21, 22 now. And I think I touched on kind of Section 8, the spending review. We are expecting some additional government funding to support some of that additional pressure in 21, 22, and the settlement was published today, and I thought we might have seen a bit more kind of detail on that, but unfortunately we haven't. However, I guess what we just don't know is how big that impact will be. I suspect it isn't going to be anywhere close to the impact that we've seen in the current year. However, we can't rule out that government funding will completely deal with some of those pressures. So there may be the need to consider, and it is a consideration, there is a lot of options in terms of how we deal with those, including savings, but there could be an option where we have to consider using reserves for the short term. And I talk about it in short term partly because reserves can only really be used once. So once they've used, they're gone, they can't be used again. So what we may tend to see in 21, 22, and this is the bit that we are keeping a very close eye on, is there may be some pressures that actually emerge that are longer term. They're not just short term in 21, 22. And if that is the case, using reserves is not an answer. We have to be building that as part of our medium term financial planning. So I think that's the distinction between short term and long term.
And I think it's worth adding that quite a lot of that pressure might come from the direction of income as well as expenditure, that some of our traditional forms of income we will find take a very long time to recover. I mean, we don't know that, but that's something that we have to think about when we're thinking ahead.
Okay. Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to both the lead member and to Taryn for the paper and for the presentation tonight. There's quite a lot of detail in the paper about the extra costs that we've incurred through COVID and the loss of income. And there's a hint at paragraph 5.1 about some areas of underspend, and you mentioned that in your opening presentation, Taryn, about a couple of businesses usual areas underspending. And I realise that the net effect of all this is still pretty bad for the council, but there's no detail of the areas of underspend, and I wonder if you could elaborate on what you're finding at the moment. Common sense suggests that a few areas like sort of utilities in the council buildings when they haven't been occupied, but there must be a few more than that.
Yeah, so as part of our monitoring, we go through all of the areas of underspend. I suppose the biggest one, or the most prominent one, is probably around our treasury management. So as a result of COVID, quite a lot of our capital programme was paused right at the beginning, and it's now kind of starting again. However, there is a delay in some of those capital programmes. So certainly the level of borrowing that we have done in year is considerably less than what we thought we were going to do in a normal year with a capital programme. So much of the underspend is around what I would call some of the corporate budgets, like treasury management. I've kind of alluded to the fact that we're proposing that we use our corporate contingency, which is 5 million. So that isn't an underspend. And there's some other bits and pieces, like some of our corporate costs, that kind of some of the underspends that probably would have come through anyway. And in particular, some very, very early deliveries of savings in some of the kind of corporate areas, as opposed to kind of the frontline services that have been mainly impacted by COVID. So it's very much the services that perhaps haven't been directly impacted from COVID that we're seeing some of those underspends.
Thank you.
Councillor Pascal.
Thank you, Chairman. I first of all wanted to welcome Taryn's point about regular updates, because I don't think, to be fair, any of us know what is going to happen next month, let alone in 3 months' time. And this assiduous work by officers and lead to revise and monitor what is happening on a regular basis seems to be fundamental to the management during the crisis. But the question I wanted to ask was really to do, I think it was under 6.2, there have been some scenarios being looked at for going further forward. And my understanding is that there are people in the business community and economists and so on who are asking questions along the lines of, you know, are we going to bounce back? We don't necessarily know how long it'll take to bounce back, but are we going to bounce back to the same place? Or are we going to bounce back to a different shape of an economy? And the economy in KNC is very dependent on the people who come to work here and also the people who visit. I mean, our population during the day almost doubles under normal times, or has done in the past. So if there is as some people have said, there's been a continuing process of change with regard to internet and shopping, for instance, or business practice, or working from home part-time and so on. If some economists are saying that this general process of change is probably going to have gone through anything like 5 years worth of normal rate of change within 1 year, and it may ratchet in the sense of not going fully back. Now, under those circumstances, depending on which sector it hits and influences, there could be some fairly radical changes in the economic environment around the council's activities, which could impinge dramatically on the need for certain services and also the ability of us to pay for the providing of those services. So the question is, have we started to model that kind of different future, which may be strategically different?
So is that, sorry, Mary, are you okay? Okay, I'll start, and then in case you want to add anything. So the answer is yes, we have. I mean, it is very, very difficult. So we're keeping an eye on projections in terms of economic conditions because of the impact it has, not just on things like our treasury management, investment and borrowing, but equally the wider impact that it has on kind of demand for services, and particularly those for the vulnerable. So we are doing some of that scenario planning. We are also looking at the changes. So, we don't like to talk about opportunities as a result of COVID, but what COVID has done is it forces you to look at everything differently. And it's not just about when we do bouncing back to what we had before. There are potentially different ways of doing things. So that is all the work that's happening at the moment. And you'll hear people talk about the transitions programme, you'll hear people talk about the recovery framework. And I think, some of those big strategic programmes are about picking up on some of that. I guess the only other thing I would say is that there are some of those changes could create longer term pressures, and they could also create longer term shortfalls in income. But equally, some of those changes may lead to longer term reductions in costs. And that's what we're starting to model. So I think there's a whole range of different scenarios that we need to be considering. But it's very, very early stages because it's almost impossible to know when and how we will bounce back. But we are keeping an eye on the economic conditions. We rely on those forecasts by those economists about what's going to happen. But I think it's very, very much still in the air.
Is that going to, is an update on that side of the work going to form part of your future updates to this group?
We can do, yeah. So we built in the latest forecast in the medium-term financial strategy, which was the latest forecast by the OBR, Office for Budget Responsibility, back in November. But they're changing every month. So if that's something that the group would like to have a look at, let's keep that on the agenda and keep that as part of the update to see what the wider economy is doing at a time when it's not just about what's happening internally as well.
Thank you very much.
And I suppose I just wanted to add that there's a sort of micro level to this, which is that, yes, we're dependent on the swings of the wider economy, but we also have our own particular set of circumstances in the borough. And that, for example, we have quite a wide variety of different organisations that pay us rent, some of which may be more robust in a downturn than others. And I think we're very lucky in that respect. The other thing is that, the survival of our high streets, which I think is on top of everybody's minds at the moment, we're very much dependent on the work that Catherine and her team are doing now. And I think that when we think about the wider economy, actually there are some things we can do ourselves so that if there are going to be fewer shops, let's make sure that most of them, or that we've got lots of what are remaining in our borough. And so it's really important that we're not passive about this, that we do actually take measures to make sure that we weather the storm as best we can. And so I think, Catherine's work is really important.
Yeah. And I think alongside that, the announcement this week by the government that they're going to think again about their white paper and some of the simplistic assumptions in that is welcome news, but we don't know the detail yet.
Yeah.
Councillor Chowan, Max.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you, Taryn and Councillor Wheel, for this report. And picking up on what may also be a micro level point, is that I would like to refer to page 2 and item 3.2 of the expenditure and income budget pressures, and in particularly the table 1 related to COVID-19 expenditures pressures. Section 3.1. Well, under the adult, there's a column, the service column, under the adult social care service, the description of financial pressures is given as additional demand, supporting the market, and then PPE and staff costs. And that figure comes out to be around about 3.358 million. And again, going further down the column, we've got other service. And support, the description of financial pressure is given as support to the shielding, CVE in brackets, cohort, non-ASC, and then again PPE. So my question, and again the cost for that is about 3.639 million. I just want some clarification on the PPE part there. And can we actually get a breakdown of actually what we've spent on PPE, just out of interest?
Yeah, so yes, we can get a full breakdown. So I think the distinction there is, and it's probably should have thought about it is how we report to government. So we report to government once a month, HCLG, in terms of our pressures. And for PPE, it's classified as PPE to support the adult social care. So initially it was the PPE going into care homes, but obviously that goes direct now. And then it was kind of the other non-adult social care PPE. So I suppose I've kept that category, or that I've kept that distinction for the purposes of this table. But we've got a full breakdown, and we've also got it service by service. So you know, most of the PPE we capture corporately. So some of that 3.6 under other is PPE. It's a whole range of other things as well. It will be some kind of support in the back office. It will be non-achievement of savings. Like I say, it's all the support into the hub. All of that will be classified as part of other. But the particular PPE in the adult social care line is just that element that is particularly related to adult social care. But we can get you a breakdown. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
so you can see that.
Know, if we've got good value for our PPE, just going forward for future learning. Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. I also commend Taryn for this excellent paper. I've been here for decades, and she's one of the most excellent finance officers we've had here at the council, I can tell you. But I also agree that these papers, these update papers are useful because things are moving so fast that we need to know, as the medium-term financial strategy reports that we now get regularly teach us, will teach more councillors how finance actually works. But Mary mentioned, Councillor Wheel mentioned the money the government gives us and the element from council tax. And of course, as you'll know, the local government association, who are, of course, we're part of, and is campaigning for the government to give more of the deficit back in hard money. They're, of course, saying that it's unsustainable that we keep collecting via the council tax, because not only, as you've said, it hurts people who are suffering from COVID, but it's unsustainable in the long term. It's sort of like a sticking plaster. But talking about the council tax, Karen mentioned it elsewhere, but in 2.4, of course, it mentions that the collection fund is estimated to have a deficit of 11.2 million as a result of reduced collection of council tax and business rates. And I thought that, particularly with regard to the business rates, I thought that we were getting recompensed from government for the fact that business rates businesses are not, they've got a business rate holiday up until April anyway, and I assume it may be carried forward. Are we not recompensed that that element, which is not our fault? The other thing is that I've read the paper, I understand it, and I understand the next paper as well. But we're still working on a 3-year deficit, although changes can happen, of about I think about 46.7 million phased over 3 years. I assume that phasing roughly is remaining. I think I'll stop there because other members have covered other items I would have covered, and I don't want to repeat what they said.
Okay, so I'll cover the business rates first of all. So you're absolutely right. So each year we collect around about 370 million in business rates. So the business rate relief, which is given to businesses predominantly in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, does equate to 231 million. So there is still a fairly large proportion of business rates that we don't get reliefs for, or they're not offered reliefs, and therefore there is still a reduction in the collection against what's remaining. What I would say on business rates, two things actually. One is that so the way the business rates work is that we have like a safety net. So there is only so much of a deficit that can actually impact on us. So even if it got considerably worse, there is a maximum impact that it would have on us, and it's called a safety net. Once you go below the safety net, then you're protected by government. And I think there was a question raised on that last time we were here. I think the other thing that you're referring to is, so as part of the spending review, we know that the government had announced that in 2021-22 that they will be offering, the devil's in the detail, but they will be offering around about a 75% kind of compensation scheme for those losses that would normally have been picked up by the local authority. So that hasn't yet been factored into 21-22, just because we don't know the detail. I thought we would have seen a bit more as part of the settlement today, but it didn't come out, so we'll wait for that. I think the 11.2 million in particular is about the impact from the deficit in the current year 2021. So they have absolutely acknowledged whether we will have a continuation of that business rate relief, so that 231 million, we don't know at this stage. It's not been announced. It may or may not do, but we do know that they will be looking at a similar scheme as our fees and charges, where they will compensate for up to 75%. So we'll wait for some of the detail, but that is going forward.
Spread that as well, aren't we, Taryn?
Yeah.
Over 3 years. I think paragraph 5.4 is quite helpful in describing how that works.
Yeah, so I mean, potentially, I say potentially, like I say, devil's in the detail, we could be compensated for up to 75%. And equally, we have that ability to spread it over 3 years, as Mary said. Normally, in a normal year, we would have to take that full deficit in the following year, which could have quite a significant impact on our.
If I could just say one more thing, Chair. In 7, of course, it talks about the government support and our support for businesses. I think I just want to recognise, because they are in my area as well, there are businesses who, for reasons we all are well aware, either could not claim furlough or could not claim government grants and are struggling through these lockdowns, wondering if they'll be open next week, and that's a real problem for them. And I think in the country as a whole, there's probably 3 or 4 million self-employed and small businesses, and they are struggling on my street and in all around the borough. And and they tell me, because I say, well, the council of course has got funds, and they say, well, we've been there, we can't get any help from anybody, and I think that's a real shame, because they're good. Some of them are good businesses, and a lot of them are. I'm talking about restaurants, cafes, small businesses. Some of them may not survive too many more lockdowns and without any or hardly any money apart from the business rate relief. If business rate is not relieved for some of those businesses that are not eligible for our fund, our grants or the government, and they have to pay business rates next year, I think there'll be more of the small businesses going to the wall. So I hope it can be extended. I know it's not in your remit, Mary, but I hope it can be extended. Thank you for indulging me, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Lindsay.
Thank you, Chairman. This question for Taryn and Mary. Your biggest concern?
For me, I think it's going on and on.
Or Taryn, it's the fact that there's a long pause indicative of the fact that things could actually be quite a lot worse.
Oh gosh, you always ask me the difficult questions, aren't you? So I suppose my biggest concern is the longer term impact. So I think certainly for 2021, all else being equal, I feel like we're okay. Even 21, 22. So certainly the spending review. Was like I say, we're still waiting for some of the details, but the spending review have absolutely recognised some of those ongoing pressures. I guess my biggest concern is that's only short term, and therefore when that funding isn't there, we still had a really significant financial challenge even before COVID, and we need to keep reminding ourselves that challenge is still there. And that all of the risks that we talked about pre-COVID, fair funding and changes in business rates and all of that is still there. It keeps being pushed back. And what that does do is just create more and more uncertainty. So I suppose for me, it's when we come out of COVID, what's the longer term impact, both COVID related and non-COVID related. But I'm sure Mary will.
Yeah, I mean, mine are about the same, except, and I also just think, how long is COVID going to go on? Because obviously the longer it goes on, it's a bit like kind of, I don't know, flesh damage. You get more and more damage that can't be recovered, and business-wise. And obviously that's a huge detriment in terms of, human experience, but also financially, it'll make it much harder for us to recover.
And I think just to add to that, it's potentially the changes in behaviour of individuals as a result of COVID that almost, I guess, we as an authority have no control over some of those behaviours, but essentially could have quite a long-term impact on particularly our income streams. I think that's probably where some of the biggest pressure is in, some of that. Like I say, that behaviour that we can influence, but we just don't have overall control over.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Pascal, you have your hand raised. Do you wish to ask another question?
I apologise, it's an old one.
Okay, well, thank you, Mary and Taryn, but I guess you're staying on for the next item as well.
Yep.
So if we move on to A8, which is the interim report from the budget working group.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. By way of introduction, this working group was established last year with a view to carrying out a scrutiny of the budget in advance of reporting to this committee and then to the council in January, February time. We did so last year and we're doing so again this year. We've made a certain amount of progress. We've had the opportunity, we've had very good support from Taryn and Jackie in particular. We've managed to speak to most of the lead members in relation to their parishes and also their supporting officers. We've been hamstrung, well, handicapped to some degree by the uncertainties which attach both to not knowing what the government settlement is going to be and not knowing what the impact of COVID-19 is going to be. And that meant we made a rather later start than perhaps we would have liked to. And certainly one of the ambitions, I think, for next year will be to start a bit earlier if we can. We're not quite finished. This is an interim report that we're putting before the full OSC. And certainly we plan to see Councillor Wheel later on to discuss the particular savings that will be proposed in one particular area where we're looking at staff savings in decisions and accountability. And I don't think we quite understand that and would therefore like the opportunity to discuss that more. And I think arrangements are being made for that to be done. Other than that, really the purpose of this paper is to put the interim report in front of this committee to ask whether this committee thinks we're going along the right lines and to ask for any recommendations for further scrutiny or matters that we could dwell on a bit more in the period that we now have between now and going final with our report. And with that, I'd really just like to close by thanking the members of the committee very much for being involved and for their contribution, and also the officers for supporting us so well. I can't hear you.
I just said thank you, Adrian, for chairing the working group. I switched myself off for a bit.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions or comments to make? Maybe some of the
quickly, Marie-Therese. Appendix 1, were promised savings achieved? Without going into any detail, but just a gut feel, Taryn, how are we with current savings? And are we going to have a bigger catch up next year to catch up with what we have, with what we will not have been able to save this year, as well as what is projected to be saved next year?
Yeah, so and it's probably one figure I haven't got in my head. So an element of that 36 million of pressures that we've just talked about under the previous report will be around the non-delivery of savings. And so the work that's and that's probably as expected. So some of that, just the focus was on kind of responding to COVID. The work that's underway at the moment is the working assumption until it's proved otherwise, and that's the work that we're doing, is that it's just a delay in those savings and they will still be achieved. It's just that instead of 2021, they will probably be deferred into 21, 22, and that's the piece of work that we're doing. There may be, and maybe that can form part of the next update to you actually, is I think we are probably getting quite close to defining whether there are any that, there could be many reasons why they're just not achievable anymore. It might be that COVID has changed things forever and therefore they're not achievable, or it could just be it's just so difficult because of the impact of COVID. So I think the next update, let me bring that in a bit more detail, but there is definitely an element of that 36 million. I want to say about 4 million is down to the non-delivery of savings, but please don't quote me on that. Let me go away and kind of have a look at the figures.
Thank you.
Is that okay, David? I'll call Councillor Evans. Janet has a question.
I believe it or not, Pat Mason and I agreed, and he asked all of my questions. It's a historical moment, but so thank you, Pat. But anyway,
historical.
Sorry?
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is, you see, great minds think alike. I wanted to thank the scrutiny officers for their superb support. They've been wonderful, and they have really guided our committees in such a professional manner, and very patient and really intelligent. They've been well chosen.
Thanks, Janet. I'll call Councillor Pascal. Will.
Thank you, Chair. It's a similar line to the question I asked in the last agenda item, but it's addressed to the chairman of Adrian Barrow-Cox. Does your work on this your detailed work into this budgeting inform you of structural opportunities for change in the council that might address the kind of more radical change that we might need to make if the economy outside the council does change in a significant way as a result of COVID? Not COVID now, but as a result of COVID changing the way in which businesses and people set about their lives afterwards, so different patterns of working and business and such like. Does the work that you're doing now in detail open your eyes to recognizing patterns or structures that might lead to a radically different way of organising the services in the council? I mean, the sort of thing I'm looking at is the synergy that's happened over the last few years between bringing various silos together and more cross-cutting working and better use of IT and the work on spans and layers and transformations and a whole number of structural strategic kind of approaches. Does your detailed work inform that understanding such that you can make recommendations in that direction?
Well, the short answer is yes and no. One of the things that we're looking to speak to Councillor Wheel about is the spans and layers side of things. And that's one of the things we're going to follow up on, because I don't think we as yet understand the savings which are proposed in that area, and that is one of the key areas for savings in the coming year. But I mean, what you're talking about is really kind of root and branch, and questions concerning whether the entire economy of London is going to change and the knock-ons there, and whether the council is going to have to make very big changes to address that sort of change. And I think the answer to that is no. We flirted with it, but I wouldn't say we've got any further than that.
The reason I'm asking that is not because I'm expecting you in your detailed work on a effectively short-term budgeting to address those directly, but sometimes by looking at things in detail, one can get an understanding of the interstices and framework of how things work in such a way that it can give tools to look at more radical ways of restructuring and synergy between services, and as I said, spans, layers, use of IT, and a whole number of different aspects. And alongside that, have you thought of benchmarking the current performance alongside best practice in other councils? Are you informed by any outside information?
No, and that's a very good idea. I think that's something we should pursue next time.
We may be brilliant without wanting to shout it or knowing that we are, but we may also be able to learn from the experience of others.
I think even if one is brilliant in 90% of areas, there will still be a 10% in which one can learn from other people. So I think that's a very good suggestion and something we should follow up on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
I will be brief, Chair. In terms of radical change, in the past, of course, it's meant racing ahead with IT and technology, and I understand all the reasons why that happens, apart from the cost reasons. But I've always asked, and so has some on your side and across the council, whether when we've done it, particularly during Buy and Try Borough, we've done it so fast that there's groups of people, particularly maybe elderly people in terms of technology, who can't keep up and therefore are not able to access a service. Now with COVID-19, we've got layers of people shielded in their houses. We've got people who we and other organisations are spending a lot of money, those COVID costs, to get to them and to service them and to help them. When eventually that is withdrawn, because it will be withdrawn, and we've made radical changes, we need to, I assume, connect how people are living then, whatever then is, and not just race ahead with radical changes in technology and other means of working because it's good for us and because we have to. And I understand why we might want to financially, if without, and I assume we would assess how it would affect those different constituencies who need those services, and particularly the elderly, ill, and so on. Because in the past, we and other councils have not been very good at that, and some people have been left without contact, without ability. I mean, there's a lot of people who are not able to manage the government in particular, and sometimes the councils, getting online, filling forms in, and all the rest of it. We all know the how that doesn't work for some people. I assume if we're making radical changes, which means radical changes to services, we'll remember we're dealing with real people who have got real problems, or no computers, or no skill, or no time, or whatever. We'll do an assessment, presumably, before we make radical changes.
Councillor Mason, I think you've made a lot of very good points. Not least, since I've been shielding, I haven't actually left my flat since August, and technology is the one thing that's actually kept me on the map. But this committee, or rather this working group, isn't really concerned with anything other than, in line with Councillor Pascal's suggestion, possibly engaging with the fallout from this, from any radical reform, and we're certainly not in the business of proposing it. And on a side note, can I say how grateful I am to hear that you may be joining our working group?
Can I add something, Chair?
Yes, that Councillor will do come in.
Just in response to that, I was looking only the other day, or having a report from our, we have a digital inclusion strand in IT, looking at many of those issues and trying to gauge exactly how big the problem is. Also, customer access falls underneath my remit. And as you know, we've had a recent new customer access strategy, and that absolutely makes it clear that we won't leave people behind by making our services so that only people who are well versed in using computers can access them. That unlike other organisations, we will not go entirely digital. We'll always leave a line open for people who don't want to access our services in that way. And I think that's absolutely right. But I do think we've also got a role and an opportunity to help more people be digitally included and to use our services in those ways and access our services in what is for us obviously a very cost efficient method as well. So it's worth us looking at it as well as from a point of equity and fairness.
Thank you, Mary. So if I have no more questions, I'd like to thank Mary and Taryn for coming in and for their report. And we'll move on to the work programme.
Thank you very much and happy Christmas to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Christmas. Thank
Happy
you.
Christmas. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So we'll move on to the work programme. One of the problems is you can't have the chat and the hands at the same time, so you have to flip from one to the other. Okay, so this is, wait a minute. So the work programme has been so far, we have looked at the budget working group is going, looking at the overview and scrutiny work programme for the beginning of next year. We've got Barry Quirk and the leader coming in January to do the state of the borough presentation, and we've also got the final report of the budget working group scrutinising the housing revenue account, and we've got modern slavery. We then follow on by looking at the scrutiny work programme. We have crime and disorder, and throughout that we will have reports on Grenfell recovery and COVID recovery. And then we're having, by July the 8th, we've got the annual scrutiny report. So there we are. I don't know if any other of the chairs who are here would like to talk about their work programme. Janet?
Yes, yes, happy to. What we did this week, we did the safeguarding of children reports, and we scrutinized 2 out of 3 because the third one hadn't been signed off by Hammersmith and Fulham. And we had a specialist come in, Jane Humphreys from the London, what is it called? London Scrutiny Central.
Sorry, it's Jackie. It's the local. She's from the Local Government Association, Jane Humphreys, and she's worked as a director of social services in other councils. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. Yes, we had her last year, and she's excellent. We've decided to. That was our first topic. We wanted to, every month, every meeting, we're going to have an update on the COVID-19 and the impact and recovery in the schools and on our young people. We're trying something different this year. We are doing the Grenfell Education Fund as a single issue meeting, and we've had quite a few people sign up for that group, which I'm very happy about, bipartisan. Then, as far as serious youth violence, we are focusing on domestic abuse, and that we had to correct the meaning of that because it's basically violence against a child, sibling to sibling, or child to parent. And the reason we changed from the knife crime is because of lockdown there, the domestic abuse has gone up, and we thought that was a good solution. And in addition, we are trying to work with 2 different scrutiny groups so that we pool our resources, and Councillor Williams is going to be chair of the working group that was set up by the Adult Social Care and Health Select Committee, and he will be reporting back to us about mental health and how it affects families. So he'll be doing that as he sits on both committees, and we thought that was a very productive use of time and talent. And we are also going to have an update on the school exclusions report that was led by Councillor Hammond last year. And the recommendations were sent in, and we're expecting an updated report and the effect on the BAME community, which is overly represented in exclusions. And we will have that at our April meeting. So I think we have a very robust program for the year.
Thank you, Janet. Marwan, would you like to talk about adult social care and health?
Yeah, thank you. It's, I mean, the work program, I will start where Janet's finished regarding the working group on mental health. This is quite especially focusing on in North Kensington. Still the work in progress. There will be, they are going to invite key stakeholders, and we are going to use that one on the basis of the Appleby report, and that's will be their basis of their investigation starting from there. So this is still work in progress. Hopefully that will be discussed at our next meeting in February, but this is going to be determined with Councillor Williams. And the other working group, which posing a bigger challenge, which I discussed with Councillor Thexter and Christine Vigars, who are leading this working group on primary care. So the work is still there, again, in progress. And that will be focusing in more details on collecting data and involving the key stakeholders, those who are providing the primary care in the context of COVID impact and what's going on in that domain. That will be pushed further up the academic year of the year, perhaps to instead of February as a single issue meeting to April. So and this is where we are at the moment. So we are focusing rather than going horizontally in our investigation. We try to go deeper into our work. So that's what limited. And of course, I am exploring on the peripheral with Brunel University, the digital inclusion and impacts for our residents in North Kensington. But this is it's not directly related to the program, but it is something came up which might feed into the aspects of the work of the primary care and the communication aspects. And this is where Mary, Councillor Wheel mentioned, because COVID has really proven a challenge for us for the digital transformation and how effectively we are communicating with our residents for digital inclusion. So, and that's the impact as well on the mental health aspects of this work. So that's tangible to both primary care and mental health, which I will be feeding into the both groups. And that's it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Marwan. Councillor Pascal.
Thank you, Chair. Our two main working areas, as you will know from the past, are the Council's 2030 carbon zero commitment and how we achieve that. And then the other one is broadly called managing streets, but it's everything from planning to waste and so on. And our cross-working piece of work with the Housing and Communities Select Committee in relation to the Grenfell areas is going to be to do with achieving the 2030 carbon neutral housing stock for the borough owned houses, and focusing on warm homes and warm people and affordability, so that we don't get fuel poverty. But going back to the 2030, we've been looking at the KD that's come through on housing sustainability policy. We've looked at the way, or looking at the way in which the government has brought forward the targets for diesel and petrol phasing out in cars, and the implication for procurement across the council. And I also continue to participate in the Environment Sustainability Strategic Board, and how all the departments in the council are now required to have a 2030 target plan, so which they can judge all their particular business stream activities against. On the managing street side, we've had updates from the Crest and wardens and how that's now going to be linking into customer services. We've had a briefing on the forthcoming greening SPD. We've also had the excellent Brompton SPD produced, and it's going out to consultation, which tackles the relationship of how the streets look, how the developers can afford to do things, how the local community gets involved, and how we can keep our medical and community use in that area. And I think there are generic lessons that can be learned from that in other planning aspects. We've looked at the culture plan, and we are also beginning to get information back on how the government has, as I referred to earlier in this meeting, the government has revised its, or in the process of revising its view with regard to the planning white paper to make it more locally orientated, thanks to the excellent intervention of both of our MPs in that respect. So that's basically where we are at the moment, and we will be starting to draft our end of year reports in January. In terms of structure, we've already got in place, and now we're going to start putting some drafting material into that. So we hope to get our reports written during the spring rather than in the last couple of weeks.
Well done, Will. Good. Greg, perhaps you'd like to talk a bit about housing in Kazim's absence.
Yep, certainly, Chair. I can talk about some of it, but I can't give you a comprehensive update because I don't know who's thinking of all of them. So there's 4 areas of work overall. There's the first one on the list is housing management, including illegal subletting and antisocial behaviour. The methodology for that is still TBC, and that's something that the Chair hasn't taken forward yet. Second one, housing repairs. We've done that in a thematic single issue meeting of the Housing Community Select Committee earlier this month, and I think that was very successful. We had quite a lot of resident involvement in it, which was good to see, and very good participation by the relevant officers. And then we have 2 working groups. There's a communities working group headed by Councillor Schmetterling. They're, I think, still establishing their work programme, and I don't have a specific update on that tonight. The Housing Safety and Healthy Homes Working Group is one I'm leading. There's 3 elements to that. The first one is joint working with the Environment Select Committee, and I don't need to repeat what Councillor Pascal said about it because he covered it comprehensively. The other 2 elements are responding to and analysing a call for evidence from residents, which is now closed, and we've got quite a few, somewhere between 40 and 50 responses to analyse, which we'll be doing at a meeting earlier in the new year, and then deciding how to take them forward. And part of the way we'll be taking them forward is we're hoping to invite a representative group of housing associations to be questioned on A, what's interesting to the residents, but B, how they tackle housing safety, the sort of things we hear from the council, but what do they do about it? So that's the 4th of the 4 work programmes. So that's the update from Housing and Communities.
Thank you very much. So the only other thing I've got to say is I think Jackie is arranging for scrutiny councillors to get some training, perhaps in the new year. Is that right, Jackie?
Yes, I was going to arrange some training on questioning for scrutiny councillors because I had a mail shot about it from an organisation, and it's something that some councillors have asked me about. So I'm waiting to get the details back, and that will be virtual training towards the end of January. But I'll give more details when I get them.
Also, I should mention that Ed Hammond from the Centre for Public Scrutiny is kind of getting towards the end of his survey of us, or impact assessment, whatever it's called. So if any members of the committee have not spoken to him but would like to talk to him about their experience of scrutiny, it would be helpful to get people's points of view. So if you haven't done so now, I think there's still time, isn't there, Jackie, to do that?
There isn't much time.
Okay.
But if somebody did want to get in touch with him, they can either do that directly, or if you haven't got his contact details, if you let me know, I can put you in touch with him.
Okay. Thank you. And so, yes, just remains for me to say thank you to Jackie and Paula and Ryan for supporting us all in our work. So thank you. So move on to the final item on the agenda. So let's take it, A9, about key decisions. Pat, do you wish to raise something with me?
Key decisions.
Mason.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll be brief on key decisions. Chairman, when I was a scrutiny chair, far too often officers and cabinet members came to me asking me to sign off urgent key decisions, and normally, or quite often, I refused because I decided these were not decisions that could not be scrutinised by the committee or even the council. And so, so like a geek, when I saw you'd signed off the Kensington High Street cycle lane key decision 2 hours or so before the 2nd of December council meeting, I said to myself, if that was a key decision that came to me for urgent sign off, I would refuse, because the council meeting was happening in 2 hours, and not only that, this meeting was happening a week later. And I often said to the members of the committee, I refused to sign X key decision because I thought you, the committee, had a right to scrutinise this, and it can wait for a week, or it can wait for a month, or whatever. And so I wondered why it was so desperately and the key decisions I ended up signing off when I was chair of Exec and Crops were to do with Grenfell. I mean, they were really urgent stuff that really had to be done. So I wondered why 2 hours before a council meeting and 1 week before this meeting, you signed off a key decision that didn't appear to be urgent, and deprive this committee of the ability to scrutinise it.
Can I tell you why then, Pat?
Please.
I'm not supposed to talk about the substance. I'm only meant to talk about urgency. But that cycle lane produced gridlock. The fact that it was on the day of the council meeting was, I think, a coincidence. As far as I was concerned, it was the day we came out of lockdown, and we are now in tier 3. And it was to help, the survival of the high streets, the restaurants, the bars which are now shut again, and the shops, because you couldn't get over the road. And okay, so my definition of urgent, Pat, is you are blue lighted in an ambulance going down the Earls Court Road and you can't get down. I think that's urgent, but it wasn't to do with the council meeting being on that day. That was the day we came out of lockdown. I wish we'd done it the day before, but I didn't get asked. And the other thing, I've forgotten now. Yeah, I mean, I did think it was urgent. And I mean, what can we do? All the KDs I've agreed to, the urgent ones, have had to do with the pandemic. But I think we should look at, again, I've been talking to Jackie about this, ways of looking at KDs and urgent KDs and how we do it, and perhaps having a more precise definition of what urgent is. But my reason was, it was the day that we were coming out of lockdown, and we're now already back into tier 3, and it wasn't a week, Pat, it's 2 weeks. And if they got 2 weeks and they could have people, helping them to build up their business, then I think it was worth it. So there we are.
I hear what you say. I don't agree. We're not going to discuss it, but if I was chairman, I would not have signed off on that decision. I don't agree with the reasons, but that's your reasons why you did it.
And the other thing is, Pat, I had, this is the thing I'd forgotten. I had no idea. All I knew is all the residents, everybody was saying to me, you've got to do something about it. I was not aware of the backlash from the cyclists. All I had was one email from a cyclist who lived in Chiswick telling me to call it in. Well, that didn't have great weight with me. And I had no idea people were going to be outside the town hall. I had no idea. I thought everybody wanted it to go.
Anyway,
I'm not supposed to talk about it.
We hear what you say, and that's all I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So we've got the KDs. Do you want to go through them now? We've picked out some things that I think we need to have scrutiny on. In general, we're not happy about how we look at KDs, and we want to have more. I don't know. We're getting a better way of doing it, aren't we, Jackie? You can help me out now. But we've got.
Yes. Myself and colleagues from governance had a meeting with the scrutiny chairs to look at a revised report for the committee, because this is quite a lengthy report that you get, and not necessarily formatted in a way that assists you to identify the key decisions that you want to scrutinise in greater depth. So we presented some information to scrutiny chairs that I and colleagues had worked on. They've asked for some refinements, and when those have been made, the committee will get to see that report, so you get to look at it, and we're hoping to include it in the papers for the next meeting.
And we're going to look at, again, about the urgency of KDs as well, and what urgent actually is, and perhaps
so it's
a better definition of it.
Yeah, so we thought we could, if scrutiny members think it's useful, I'll ask colleagues from governance to do like a briefing session for councillors on KDs. So just to go through it to assist with you. So we've been working, got a little bit of information that we've been putting together on that to support the session.
Councillor Hammond.
Thanks, Chair. I welcome what Jackie's just said, and I was just going to say it might be helpful to hear what Ed Hammond has got to say about the subject when he eventually reports.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was, at this time I have read the report and scanned through and I just picked out one that I thought looks really interesting, which is the greening SPD on page 55, and I think, as we're into specifics and rather than talking about process, specifics would be an interesting thing to talk about. That one grabbed my attention as being something that would be well worth a scrutiny discussion, whether in this committee or in the Environment Select Committee. I'm not sure, but I'm certainly found that looking interesting.
I mean, you will notice a lot of them, Greg, are actually housing matters, but whether they're sort of mundane ones or they require scrutiny, but quite a lot of the KDs are about housing.
Yes, they are, and there's
income policy.
There's quite a lot of very mundane ones in and amongst the policy ones.
Yeah.
Extend the lease of this and repaint that, for example.
So the other one I picked out was the biodiversity action plan. That might be one Will might want to do.
Yeah, Chairman, if I could, the one on the greening SPD is an interesting case, because we actually had earlier in the summer, we had been briefed that the greening SPD would be ready before our November meeting. It's transpired that it's been delayed, and we had a paper to our last select committee which outlined the need for and the role of the SPD amongst the other planning documents and structures in response to climate change, and therefore we were able to talk about the purpose of it before it was ready as such. So we didn't have a report in the greening SPD, but we had a report on its purpose and its place alongside the other elements that are being put together. So that was a very useful exercise in a way of getting round the delay, but to keep the momentum in the discussion in the committee. The biodiversity one is certainly one that we've got on the radar. I haven't seen the draft of it yet. It'll be very interesting to see whether it merits purely as an information to our committee members, as a sort of officer report for information only, or whether it merits being tabled at the next one of our select committees, or whether it's something we may wish to ask if it could be elevated to this committee. Going back to the discussion of this committee last time, and in the minutes AH last time, although we're in A9 this time, it's minuted that I suggested 3 key decisions from our previous discussion that might be of consideration by the Environment Select Committee. The one on housing sustainability and fuel poverty strategy, having indicated it at the meeting and it being an action point, this is a bit of feedback to Jackie and officers. I only received a copy of that KD this afternoon. Its current status is that it's on consultation already, and I've only just started to read it. It will be a very important paper to our 2030 working group. It will also be one of the documents that we will want to discuss cross-working with Greg Hammond and his working group in the Housing and Communities Select Committee. And it's a fundamental area that we want to look at, because it combines not only the sort of technical stuff of getting 2030 carbon zero done, but also social policy and the balance of bearing the cost, if you like, between the council, the government, and the tenant, who may be poor on social support and all that sort of thing. So fuel poverty is definitely going to be an area we're going to discuss. The second one I mentioned was the website audit, which might seem slightly strange from the Environment Committee, but it's got a lot of cross-working to do with how, for instance, Crest and customer services and so on may link up or may not link up. And that we're going to take as an information one to our committee members, and have a working meeting with officers in January to see whether there's further work that we need to scrutinise as such, or we just need to know how it's going to work. And then the third one was Parks and Landscape Maintenance Contract, which we'd already discussed prior to the KD in the committee. And Terry Oliver and his officers have done an excellent job, rather like on the waste contract. And the service provided by the department has been enhanced under the new contract. It's reduced cost, and it's also responded to climate change in the way of the planting, etc. is going to be dealt with. Plus, there's flexibility for introduction of carbon zero vehicles in their operations. So those are the three. They're very different. And I will look forward to the final version of the structure proposed by Jackie and other officers together with yourself, as to how we might deal with the flood that you receive of KDs and how we manage that, including the urgent ones. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll call on Marwan now, and then Janet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will actually start where as well Councillor Pascal finished regarding the quality of our discussion for key decision. So I'm really grateful and thanks for revisiting this for better scrutiny in order to reach a quality decision at the end. So I welcome Jackie's and her team in reviewing this issue to guide us in order to prioritize what we need to scrutinize later. So I really, that's all what I have to say, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Janet?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are two that I would like to get some more information on, please. The first one is on page 29, and it's the Grenfell recovery. And I would it says additional funding to key schools for emotional support. I fully support that. It's very important, and I'd like to get some, for my committee, some specifics on that, if we may, and an update. That would be great. And the other one is the funding for provision of youth services, which was they discussing the replacements for EPIC, and I know we're due an update from the lead member and his officers. And we would just like to see that everything is in effect, is working, and what the expenditure has gone for and what they're offering the young people in terms of the provision. So I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I have nothing more to say but to thank Jackie and Paula and Ryan, and also to thank you all, the committee, for all your work and supporting me, and to wish you all a very happy Christmas.
And Catherine.
And happy Christmas to you.
And Catherine.
Catherine, yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, and keep safe, please.
And see
Yes,
you all
thank you, Chair.
2021. We hope it's a better year. Yeah.
Quite.
We hope so. We hope so. Thank you.
We hope so.
Bye.
Good night.